Damian Lillard requested trade from the Portland Trailblazers. The writing was on the wall. It was inevitable. It wasn't if, it was just a matter of when. And here we are. He made the move yesterday, and it's a big move, man. What's your thoughts on everything, and where do you think he's going to land?
Thank God. Thank God that has finally happened. This honestly, I'll be real. This should have happened a while ago. To me, this probably should have happened after CJ McCollum got traded a few years ago to New Orleans. To me, that was kind of the writing on the wall that Portland was going in a new direction. I feel like the franchise has wanted to rebuild for some time now, but I obviously when you have a player with that type of caliber that Damian Lillard has, of course you're going to look to try to continue to build a contender. But it's like you mentioned, man, the writing was on the wall a while ago. Give credit to Dame. He stayed loyal throughout all the years, all the good years and all the trying years. But, now it's just time. I think he's around like 32, 33 years old. I know he's in his early 30s. So now, it's time to figure out what's next in this second part of your career. It's been 11 years in Portland. So now let's see if you can possibly try to aim for a championship moving forward. So, there's been reports, Miami, I think that's kind of possibly, it could be a good move, but, it would have to be a 3-team trade, which means that a third team would have to be involved within that, especially considering that Miami lost a lot of their really valuable shooters like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus. Gabe Vincent in LA. We'll get to that later. Same thing with Max Strus. He's in Cleveland now. So kudos to those guys for getting the bag. But honestly, that would be a great pairing. I know that I've said before that the NBA should kind of go away with the big threes and kind of have like 2 all-stars and then a good supporting cast. But honestly, Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo wouldn't really sound too bad. So I'm all for it. And then of course, Brooklyn is also obviously on the radar as well. They're obviously looking to move forward with a guy like Mikal Bridges. They still got guys like Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson, and those guys as well. Pretty solid team. Ended up making the playoffs last year, right before getting swept. I heard some rumblings about the Clippers. Even before Russ ended up resigning, even if Russ didn't resign, I didn't really see that as a good move anyways, especially with the team being so injury prone. Not saying that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are great, are not saying that they're not great players, but obviously we know that those guys have dealt with numerous injuries throughout the past possibly 3 to 4 years. But I'm happy for Dame. I think it seems to me like Dame, he's kind of content with this decision to request a trade because I think for years he's been kind of going back and forth. I know that he wants to stay in Portland. I know that, that's the team that drafted him. So, he wants to be in that same conversation as like the Kobe Bryants, the Dirk Nowitzkis, Tim Duncans, and all those other guys who played their whole career with one franchise and obviously won championships. But I've been on record saying that, it's one thing for the star to be loyal, but it's like the front office has to return that favor. And to me, the front office has not done enough to possibly return that favor, possibly getting another all-star, another great valuable player that could possibly win them championships. Like you look at all the other guys, like Tim Duncan had Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. You look at Kobe, he had Shaq, and then later on he had guys like Pau Gasol, Andrew Bynum, Lamar Odom, and these guys. You even look at Dirk, he had guys like Jason Terry. He had Jason Kidd, even though Jason Kidd was on the back end of his career, still a valuable player. So really top tier talents that could help elevate his chances of winning a championship. So to me, I just felt like that wasn't the case at Portland. Jeremy Grant's a great player. I'm not going to take anything away from him. They did have guys like Anthony Simons, but to me, that just wasn't going to be enough to possibly win a championship. And then, of course, with them drafting Scoot Henderson with their third pick and not deciding to trade that pick, to me, that was also a sign as well that, it's possibly time to move on. So I'm happy for Dame. I can't wait to see what's next for him. I honestly think that Miami is going to be the one that possibly gets him. But, we'll just have to see what's next for him moving forward.
Yeah, it was time. It was definitely time, man. He paid his dues there, had a lot of success in terms of scoring, winning a bunch of games, going to the playoffs a few years, going to the Western Conference Finals in 2019, 70-point games, 60-point games, multiple 40-point games. Easily, one of the best Portland Trailblazers of all time, right up there with Clyde Drexler, Bill Walton, a few other players as well. So he's a legend. He's a legend in that city for that organization. But you know, at the end of the day, you have to figure out what's right for you in the present day, and it just looks like Portland is going in the transition of they want to rebuild, they want to build and start fresh. And when you have someone as talented as Dame, someone that's done so much in this league already, the one thing that he's missing is a championship or an opportunity to get to the finals, get to a championship. And right now, Portland isn't in that discussion. You know, they have different plans, they have different goals. I know the president said one thing, but it's based on the moves they've made, their lack of aggressiveness of trying to acquire another All-Star to complement Damian Lillard since getting rid of CJ McCollum a few years ago. You know, it doesn't look like, at least from the outside looking in, they didn't do enough. They should have did more if they wanted to keep him. You're aggressive in these moves. You saw Kyrie get traded. You saw Kevin Durant get moved. Kevin Durant should have been a number one priority once he requested a trade last year around this time. That's when you should have been trying to make moves, try to see what's going on. He wanted to go to the Heat or Phoenix. Trailblazers could have put their name in the hat and try to do whatever they can to get Kevin Durant. That shakes up the entire Western Conference. You got Damian Lillard and KD. That changes everything, especially what we've seen now. Over this last year with dominant big twos taking over, like we saw with Jokic and Jamal Murray this year in the finals, and like we saw a little bit in the small sample size in Phoenix with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. And in Portland, they were just too. They kind of just had their, they kind of just they didn't make the moves. They didn't make the moves, man. They just do enough. They didn't do enough, and I think I was so tired of talking about this, and it was so much. It was back and forth. One moment they want to keep him, the next moment he wanted to stay, and then the next moment he wanted to leave. I'm just glad we finally have a decision now. That, he wants this. This is it. He's asking for a trade. Woj reported that even though he wanted to go to Miami, he wants to go to Miami. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to oblige and necessarily send him to the team that he wants to go. I know people saying he doesn't have a no trade clause, but it's like a silent no trade clause in this circumstance. Whereas, just because, you could send him to where, where you get the best package, as we saw with Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell wanted to go to the Knicks, and he ended up getting traded to the Cavs. And that ended up being a great situation for him. And they got to the playoffs, 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, had a lot of success. So, even though you don't always go to your preferred destination. So in Brooklyn, KD wanted to go to Phoenix. They obliged, and they made the trade. It made it happen, and he went to Phoenix. I don't think the Mavericks was Kyrie's, number one destination.
Not at all.
He didn't have a great relationship with the front office and the top executives there with the Brooklyn Nets, and they made the move. They made the best move for them. So this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. The Heat clearly are the favorites in acquiring Damian Lillard. I think the Sixers play a role too now. With the news of James Harden opting in to request a trade. We're going to talk about that next. They're in need of another star to complement Joel Embiid. I think Joel Embiid and Damian Lillard. You have the MVP and you have one of the greatest scorers. You have two of the greatest scorers in our league today, playing in two different positions, big and a guard. We know that type. We know the success that has in the league. So Sixers. I'm seeing the Clippers. I don't think the Clippers are in it now. They just re-signed Westbrook. I think he's going to be their starting point guard for them going into next year. So I don't see that happening. So to me, Brooklyn could be a wild card in this. Also, they have a plethora of assets in the Harden trade, in the Kyrie and KD trade. They got a bunch of draft picks there, a bunch of players, and some young players, some solid wings that they could potentially move. That Portland may like in a certain trade package. So I think still Miami's number one. It just makes the most sense. They're gonna probably have to move Hero. I saw the reports of Hero changing his bio and changing his Twitter.
Regardless of what happens, he only needs to pack his bags, bro. He's out of there. He's out of there.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. You get hurt at the first game of the playoffs, and your team goes to the finals. It just kind of looks like they don't need you, and they did.
That's true.
Even though they didn't win, but to get that far without him, it gives people that perception. He had a great career in Miami, 6 months a year. He's done some good things. Average 20, really good shooter. But when you get a guy like Damian Lillard, you have to give up some good players in the process. So it just comes with the business of basketball. So Miami's number one for me. I think Philly is like 1B, really. That's how I see it. Because if you trade Harden, what are you really getting? Harden's still a great player. Harden's still a really good player. You're not going to get anything in return that's going to be to the level or value of Harden in that trade. What does a Harden trade look like? Maybe they don't even find a trade partner for Harden and he stays. I think that's a possibility as well. Again, like I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if they do move him, you're not going to get an all-star type player in return for that deal. That's just not happening. So looking at Damian Lillard, I just feel like that's inevitable. If you want to win, you want to get past the second round, something Embiid hasn't done his entire career. Just won back-to-back scoring titles. Just got the MVP. The time is now. He's in his prime. He just saw his colleague that he's competing against in this era for who's going to be the best center of this generation, win a championship. It's time. You get a guy like Damian Lillard that completely changes the landscape in the Eastern Conference and in the NBA. And in the NBA, it just does because of how dominant he is as a scorer and a playoff performer too. He's exceptional. During those playoff runs, he played well. It's just the teams weren't good enough. So you got a guy like Lillard and Embiid. That's pretty dominant to me. So I see Heat, Sixers as the top two teams. I really don't see it. Maybe Brooklyn too. Maybe Brooklyn. He said he was a fan of McCall Bridges. I feel like they have the most assets to give Portland if that's what they're looking for. If they have come to an agreement with Dame, and he says he said he preferred to go to Miami, and they do that. Most likely, he'll end up with the Heat. But if there's this kind of give and take, and maybe they feel blindsided because they had a perception after an alleged meeting that they had that he was going to stay, and they're going to try to build around him and try to make it work, and then he asked for a trade. Maybe they feel like, okay, we're not going to send you to Miami. We're going to send you somewhere else, and we're going to get the best package possible. Cool. So that's why I think Brooklyn could play a factor in that because they do have a lot of draft picks that they acquired over the last few seasons, and they have some nice young players as well. So those are my top three teams. But yeah, just to conclude there, it's time, and wherever he goes, it's definitely going to shake up the NBA, no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. I think either way, I think we're kind of leaning on, no matter what it is, he's going out to the Eastern Conference. And to me, that I feel like that definitely does make him better because throughout the years has been the West has kind of overshadowed even though the East has become more competitive over the more recent years, but it's kind of been always the West kind of overshadowing, especially, I think 3 of the last 4 champions have come out of the West, the Lakers, the Warriors, and now the Nuggets. So, the West has obviously, been shaking up, the NBA for a while. And even though Damian Lillard hasn't really accomplished much, he's only gotten a 1 Western Conference Finals appearance, but a guy of that caliber heading to the East, that definitely does can't possibly change the dynamic of the conference. So wherever he goes, whether it's Miami, whether it's Brooklyn or Philly, that automatically elevates their chances as title contenders.
Absolutely.